Imagine this: one day you are sitting on a lonely cliff, holding a small stone in your hand. Without thinking, you throw it into a nearby cave. A few seconds later, you hear the sound of something breaking. You smile and walk away. Never imagined that this tiny moment would one day change the history of archaeology. It sounds like the beginning of a movie, but it really happened. This is the true story of one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. It was the spring of 1947, near the Dead Sea. A young Bedouin shepherd was searching for a missing goat. Out of curiosity, he picked up a small stone and threw it into a nearby cave. He expected silence. Instead, he heard something break inside the cave. At first, it didn't seem important, but that signal sound would lead to one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. Curiosity pulled him closer. He climbed toward the cave. Inside, the air was still dust, covered everything. Then he noticed large clay jars. Some were still sealed. Others had already been broken. Inside them were old leather scrolls. No gold, no jewels, just ancient writings. To him, they looked like old pieces of leather. He couldn't have known that scholars would one day call them the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were not just pieces of old leather. For nearby 2,000 years, they had remained hidden in silence, preserved by the dry desert air, at the darkness of the caves, as if history itself had been holding its breath. But from that one day, the silence was broken. News of the discovery spread far beyond the desert. Soon, archaeologists, historians, and scholars began to realize that they were looking at something extraordinary, something that could reshape our understanding of history and the ancient world. Those clay jars had become faithful guardians for nearly 2,000 years. But perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't the scrolls themselves. The greater mystery was their journey. Where had they come from? Who had written them? And what had happened that these ancient writings ended up hidden inside these caves for almost 2,000 years? Those caves were not the beginning of their story. They were simply its final destination. Soon, the land of the Dead Sea seemed to hosting an extraordinary gathering. Its guests were not kings, nor generals, but archaeologists, historians, linguists, and scholars of ancient texts from around the world. They had all come for one reason: to answer a mystery that had remained silent for nearly 2,000 years. Where had these scrolls come from? Breaths were held. Questions, one after another, began to arise. Everyone waited for the moment the first lines would finally be read. When those first lines were read for the very first time, the scholars realized they were not looking at a single scroll. They were standing before a treasure of hundreds of ancient manuscripts. Some felt remarkably familiar. Others were unlike anything they had ever seen before. You might be wondering the same thing I did. How did anyone know these scrolls were really nearly 2,000 years old? At first glance, the scholars suspected they were looking at something ancient. The writing, the leather, the jars, everything pointed to a distant past. But a suspicion was not enough. Science doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with curiosity, and it moves forward with evidence. To find the answers, scientists didn't rely on just one method. They carefully examined the leather, the ink, the style of the handwriting, the shape of the jars, and even the layers of the surrounding soil. When all of the evidence was brought together, the picture slowly became clear. These scrolls had truly journeyed across nearly 2,000 years before returning once again to the world of humanity. But have you ever wondered why these scrolls become so important? Because they open a window into the past, a past that until then had only been partially understood. These scrolls gave scholars a rare opportunity to read ancient writings once again. Some had remained hidden for centuries. Others turned out to be the oldest known copies of texts that are still read around the world today. Among all those scrolls, one captured more attention than any other. A scroll that had survived almost completely intact. But its importance was not just its remarkable condition. This copy was more than 1,000 years older than the oldest copy scholars had ever studied before. It was the Great Isaiah Scroll. Now, two copies stood side by side. One had been known for centuries, the other had returned from nearly 2,000 years of silence. The result left many scholars astonished. The similarities were remarkable. There were differences, of course, mostly in spelling, writing style, and a few minor variations. But the core message across most of the texts has remained remarkably consistent. This comparison was never just about one scroll. It was about the journey a text had taken across more than 1,000 years. But this was only the beginning of the surprises. These scrolls were far more than pieces of ancient leather. Each one held a small library within it. Some contained copies of the Hebrew scriptures, some preserved prayers and sacred hymns. Others described the laws and daily life of an ancient community, and some contained writings that were completely unknown to scholars at the time. But the greater question still remained unanswered. Who had written this extraordinary library? One of the strongest hypotheses pointed to a small community living near these caves. Today, we know this place as Qumran. Many scholars believe that members of this community may have played an important role in writing or preserving at least some of these scrolls. But if members of this community were the writers or guardians of these scrolls, another question still remained. Why did they hide the extraordinary library inside these caves? Many scholars believe that as the Roman army approached the region, those who had been protecting the scrolls hid them inside the caves in the hope of preserving them. But this is not the only hypothesis. Even today, scholars haven't yet reached a single consensus about exactly what happened. Another question still remained. Did this discovery really change history? The answer isn't that simple. These scrolls didn't rewrite history, but they allow scholars to see the past with greater clarity. They show that some of the texts we still have today have roots far older than once imagined. And at the same time, the small differences between the manuscripts opened a new window for scholars to better understand how these texts were preserved across the centuries. Sometimes the greatest discoveries don't change the past, they simply help us understand it more clearly. Perhaps the greatest discovery was never the scrolls themselves. Perhaps the greatest discovery was the curiosity that led us to them. We are not here to force any belief on anyone. We are not here to judge anyone. We are here to ask questions, to explore, and to continue this journey together. Thank you for being my friend, my companion on this journey. Welcome to Human Paradox.